Welcome back to another Wednesday on the Pagan Perspective. I'm your Wednesday host, Yeka, and this week we are still revisiting topics from the past years, and we've got a great one, which is how do we move from studying to actually practicing whatever our path or practice is. So, one of the really kind of tricky things, or rather something that I try to be very, very mindful about when creating a video, when in conversation with people, and it can be particularly tricky in this sort of format, is I try very hard to not be prescriptive because I recognize that it is very difficult for me to actually know, for me to have the right answer or to know what's going on for somebody else, to think that I would know what's best for somebody else, I think would take a tremendous amount of hubris. And I don't think that that's necessarily the most respectful way to engage with another person because I don't think that it recognizes their intellectual and emotional autonomy, their agency. At the same time, when questions are asked directly for looking for advice, uh, it can be a tricky line to walk because you want to help and respect and have all these ideas to share, but without stepping on um, that person's agency, I suppose. And it can be even more tricky with a format like this where we are responding to a specific person, but we're also speaking to the hundreds and sometimes thousands of other people who will view these videos as well. And we're working on very little information. So, as I mentioned, I try when I can, I really try to not be prescriptive. I don't always succeed, but it's something that I work at, and it's something that instead, a strategy that I try to use is to share what works, what experience I personally have, um, and invite folks to try that out. If it was a person to person, face to face conversation or communication, I often think that one of the biggest roles of the advice giver in a situation like that is to actually listen, is to spend most of the time listening to the other person and creating that space for them to explore and kind of help them to make the advice on their own, and maybe do a little help them reframe some of the ideas and that sort of thing. But it's more a position of a listener than it is a dictator or something of the sort. But given all of that, the question is about how we move from just studying into practicing. And that can be a tricky thing because what there are so many different things that somebody could mean when talking about paganism, and what this person could be studying may be very different or very similar to what I practice. So I'm going to approach it from my style of paganism, which is a very experiential. It's about the way that it feels day to day and the things that are done day to day, which is why I like to call what I do a practice rather than a path or a faith or something like that. So again, without trying to say this is what you should do or shouldn't, if I was approaching it, I would try to find something. Well, when you first get started, it can be so overwhelming to try and add all this new stuff in, all of these changes all at once. There's a couple of time periods in our lives where that could really lead to that. We're in life season transitions. moving into a new home, changing, moving to a new city and starting at a school, or graduating, or starting a family, or things like that, where there's huge changes. That's an opportunity, a time to do lots of changes at once. But outside of those small points in our lives, it can be very difficult to do a whole bunch at once. So when I want to add something in, when I want to start practicing something, what I try to do is I try to find something to start with, something core to start with. And for a pagan practice like mine, that would probably be grounding. Grounding is, I would say, most likely the center practice of my practice. It's the thing that I try and do every single day, multiple times a day, and really is the center of my practice. So if I was starting from scratch, that's where I would start with. I would start with saying, okay, I'm going to just start grounding every day. And later, when that becomes so part of me that I don't even think about having to do it, then I'll add something else in. And a trick that may be useful when adding new habits, trying to create new habits, is to find something that is already a habit that you do. For me, for instance, with the grounding, that's something that I will do with my morning cup of whatever. I'm not drinking coffee right now, but I typically drink coffee. So my morning coffee right now, it's my morning tea or my morning drink. I do that every single morning. And there's an unintentional ritual that comes about the, you know, what order I pull down the cup and what order I put the different mixes of whatever I'm putting in. That's a habit that happens. And so that's a beautiful place, a perfect place to be able to insert another step, to remember that, okay, when I sit down to drink that first sip, I'll go ahead and ground. I'll do my 20, 40-second grounding practice. And I'm just using that as an example. It could be anything. It could be whatever it is that you're working on. And of course, maybe you don't have a morning cup of coffee, or maybe that's not a good fit for you. Maybe there's something else. But finding something to attach it to help bring it in to an already existing habit, so it can become part of your daily life, part of your practice. And once you have that strong foundation, building from there. That's how I would approach it, and I hope there was maybe something useful in that for those of you watching. So I'd love to hear from you folks if there are techniques or things that you do that help you to incorporate new patterns, new habits. If you want to share any of those, please let us know. And until next week, take care.